start with a quote. And this is the quote from the video that I linked to this presentation. And it's from a meteorologist in our area. The irony is sometimes when the damage is so bad, like happened in Cedar Rapids, it knocks your communications out. So you're not hearing something. And that's one of your red flags, is when you know something bad is going on, but you're not hearing much about it. Then you know that you're in a real serious situation. So I'm going to pop this up, pop my screen up here. Oh. All right. So my name is Lelia Garner. I go by Lee, WA0UIG. I'm the Iowa section manager. Prior to being section manager for the last 2 years, I was the section traffic manager, which I truly enjoyed. I live in Robbins, which is on the northern edge of Cedar Rapids. So I'm in the Cedar Rapids metro area. I have ComL, ComT, and OxCom training. I've been involved in ARRL since I got my ticket about 10, 12 years ago. I attend a lot of public service events. I even travel to do communications, like to Chicago Marathon. I'm a founding member of the Lynn County Newham Net, which has been going on for about 10 years now. Great net where Newhams come and just to chat, learn to push to talk. I'm also a founding member of the Planning Committee, also known as Rat Pack. I've been involved with that for about a year now. And this presentation tonight is geared towards ARRL. And other community-based amateur radio groups. So I'm using plain English for this presentation, but I do have about 7 acronyms and abbreviations. ARRL, Amateur Radio Emergency Service, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, NWS, National Weather Service, PDS, Particularly Dangerous Situation, PTT, Push to Talk, OJT, On the Job Training, SOG, Standard Operating Guidelines, and of course you can call them SOPs, Standard Operating Procedures, or protocols. So that's it. Everything else is plain English, and this is, there's also going to be an interactive portion where I'm going to ask for your input, and I'll give you plenty of warnings. So figure out how to unmute yourself, and I'll ask for your input. You can do it either verbally or in the chat. All right, so everybody can see my title page all right. That is the tower just east of Cedar Rapids in the metro area of Marion. And that tower did not survive the derecho. WMT, our local AM station, where you turn for emergency broadcast, went off the air, did not survive the derecho, and did not come back up for a good period of time. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we're starting with this. So this slide is an hourly composite of what the derecho looks like if you take a snapshot at each hour, and this is over a 12-hour period. And what you notice here is what's called a bow echo. And a bow echo is a classic component of a derecho. Okay, and there's a lot of information about bow echoes. You can spend the entire afternoon reading about that kind of stuff. But this is a picture of the derecho in 1-hour snapshots over 12 hours, and it traveled about 770 miles. And what you see here in this picture is Iowa. Iowa's in the center part of the United States. On the eastern side is the Mississippi River. On the western side is the Missouri River. Above us is Minnesota, below us is Missouri. And I live about, okay, so here's the nose of Iowa, Mississippi River. I live about 100 miles west of the Mississippi, right about in here. And you'll see why that's important here in a second, about that location. So let's see here. Here again is the same area that we were looking at before, but this is a different kind of map. And what you see here is Iowa is in the center area. What you see here is this area covered 60 mile per hour winds, 80 mile per hour winds here, intermittent 100 mile per hour winds, and then these yellow dots, 120 miles per hour plus, and I live right here where the interstate sign is and that yellow blob is. So we had 120 mile per hour plus winds coming in to the Cedar Rapids area. Derecho climatology. Now, a lot of people have not heard of derechos. However, derechos have been around for quite a while. One of the reasons you don't hear about them is that they are hard to predict. They come up very quickly. If you live in Iowa, you understand what conditions are right for tornadoes. You become aware of that kind of thing. You know how to watch the sky. We take our Skywarn classes. We, learn about all different aspects of thunderstorms and what produces tornadoes and things like that. But that derecho itself comes up so quickly that it's not something that we can be prepared for. But if you see this climatology graph here, the tan area, 1 derecho every 4 years, somewhere in this area. Narrowing it down to the light green, 1 derecho somewhere in this area every 2 years. In this dark green, 1 derecho every year. Again, here's Iowa right here. I live about 100 miles west of the Mississippi, about where that light green, dark green line occurs. And up here in Minnesota, poor Minnesota, they get 1 derecho every year in this area. And then down here, 4 derechos every 3 years. So commonly April through August, and ours hit August 10, 2020, last year. All right, and this is a graphic. It's a satellite image of, and this actually is an animation. There's a link to it later that you can watch yourself. But this shows you the size aspect of the derecho of this convection system of thunderstorms covered. So Iowa's about 250 miles, 250 miles in height here, and about 350 miles in length, 250 miles in width, 350 miles in length approximately. So that is the size of the storm. That's covering all of Iowa. And here's the timeline. And why is this important? Because this is 7 a.m. enhanced outlook for thunderstorms. So 7 a.m. there was something, as we all know, there's always a risk of thunderstorms. Moderated risk at almost 11 o'clock. But then at 11:25, we get the particularly dangerous situation. Now that is not a product that I had been familiar with before in the past. It is something now that I look for. That comes out of the Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma, and that is now part of my toolkit to look for those those products. That's not something that that the average person would see, not something they put out necessarily over the radio. That is a specific product that the meteorologists use. So you'll see here, 11:25 a.m. 15 minutes later, we get our first thunderstorm warning, and there's Lynn County. I'm in Lynn County. We get our first thunderstorm warning at 11:48. Now, I'm out working. I'm not watching TV. I'm not listening to the radio. I'm not listening to the repeater. I'm working. I come home for lunch about 12:15, let the dogs out. So at 12:15, I come home, I look at the sky, and the sky is black. I grabbed my kids, my dogs, my HT, and I headed for the basement. HT, handy talkie, handheld radio. All right, so I head for the basement. So at 12:15, I turn on my HT, and I'm hearing 70 mile per hour winds. So I get my mobile out then in the basement, and sure enough, the next county over is reporting substantial damage. Their repeater's still up, and I'm listening to them. So I get home at 12:15. I'm in the basement by 12:30, and that's when the storm hits. Then for the next 45 minutes, I'm in my basement, and that in Iowa, that's where you go. You go to your basement. If you have a basement, you head for the basement. For the next 45 minutes, the wind did not go under 70 miles an hour. 45 minutes later, I come out of the basement, and for the next 11 days, I do not have power. So that just gives you, the reason I put this timeline in here, because look at the compression of the amount of warning that you get. So at 11:25 a.m., particularly dangerous situation, not a product that not everybody would see, but then at 11:40, at almost noon, we're starting to get things to come over the television and radio, not that I'm watching that kind of thing. At 12:15, I'm starting to hear people on the repeater report damage to the west of us on their repeaters. And then the storm hits at 12:30. Then we have our second thunderstorm warning. Storm hits Iowa City. 1:30 p.m. it hits the very western edge of Iowa and then heads out across Illinois and Indiana. So just to give you an idea of what the time frame looks like in terms of, because we're all interested in preparedness here. All right, so here's a PDS. This is what it looks like, particularly dangerous situation. And this one actually included the term derecho. I do think I have a link to this, actually, this numbered product from the Storm Prediction Center. But it is now something that I actually look for now when I see thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, that kind of thing. I do go and look for these products now. But it is not something I had seen before. So, all right. Again, this gives you an idea of the warning lead time was 32 to 47 minutes. And the reason I included this is because it does include the actual documentation that a lead time of 37 to 47 minutes is very good. The national average is 10 to 15 minutes for a tornado warning. So it is what it is, and that can happen anywhere. And I'm down here, probably, I'm just a little bit north of Hiawatha. So technically I had 42 minutes warning if I had known to look, if I'd known where to look. Sirens didn't go off until 12:30. So, you know, your situational awareness is your own responsibility. Okay, here's the summary. On August 10 through 11, 2020, a severe derecho swept across the Midwestern United States, predominantly, I've got to pull this down here, eastern Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. It caused high winds and spawned an outbreak of weak tornadoes. Some areas reported torrential rain and large hail. Peak wind gust estimated 140 miles per hour in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Peak wind gust measured 126 miles per hour in Atkins, Iowa, which is on the southwestern edge of Cedar Rapids. Hardest hit or notably affected area, Cedar Rapids, Iowa area. Damage costs $11 billion. Tornadoes caused 25, maximum rated tornado in EF1. All right, so they said 11 billion. It was the third costliest natural disaster in 2020. Hurricane Laura was 19 billion. And here's Hurricane Laura's icon right down here. The the multi-state wildfires of California, Oregon, Washington was 16.5 billion. And the Midwest derecho, this icon right here, here's Iowa, so that little nose of Iowa there, was 11 billion. So it was the third most costliest natural disaster in 2020, and I believe it's the costliest thunderstorm ever. So, but I don't have that information right in front of me. Okay, we're coming up to the interactive part. This is actually a derecho in Minnesota. However, this is basically what I saw, and this is why I headed for the basement. As if you see this, you're not going to ask what's going on. You're going to grab your HT and your dogs and your kids and head for the basement. So this is basically what I saw. All right. So what I'm going to ask you to do is bear with me, because we're going to head for the basement And we're going to sit there for 45 minutes while the wind gusts between 70 miles an hour and 100 and something miles an hour, not knowing that this storm was coming, not knowing what's happening to your own home or to anybody else around you at this point. Remember, I got home at 12:15. At 12:30, I'm in the basement. At a little after 1 o'clock, I emerged from the basement, okay? So picture yourself there. All right. So when you come out, this is what happened to your community. All right. This is a strip mall over on the west side of Cedar Rapids. Okay. It's a business. It's been there. I know that business very well. Here's an apartment building on the west side of Cedar Rapids. Here is the high school, also on the west side of Cedar Rapids. I just grabbed these pictures and you can see the damage. The doors blew open, things came in, roof came off, a lot of damage to that high school. We have 3 large high schools in the area, and that's one of the 3, and the others were damaged. I think it was all of the schools in Cedar Rapids were damaged from what I remember, and we're unable to have children in them because of the damage. All right, but you do not know this because you've been in your basement for 45 minutes with 15 minutes of warning. So this is what you know. That when you come out, this is what you see. All right, your power lines are down. There's trees across your road. You have no idea what's happening elsewhere in your community at this point. This is what you know. This is what you see. All right, so you have emerged in Iowa, you've come out of your basement. All right, you've emerged from whatever your safe place is. You are uninjured. Your neighbors appear okay, and the neighborhood has no apparent gas leaks. Your roof is on. Your car is operational and has a full tank of gas. You own a generator, and you are a ham. What is the first thing you would do? All right, so go ahead and unmute or put it in chat, and when I hear it or see it, I will go on to the next slide. So I got to find, I can't see chat, can I? All right, so what is the first thing you would do? You came out, that's what your street looks like. What's one thing that we recommend everyone, what is everyone encouraged to do, no matter what their
family.
What's that?
Take care of your family.
I'm heading to the next slide. Contact your family. Let them know you are okay, or check on them if they are in the scope of the disaster. The first thing anybody does, and the reason I'm bringing this up this way is because from experience, this is exactly what happened. And this is exactly what all my neighbors did and all my friends did. They contacted their family members. That's exactly right. Everyone needs to have a family communications plan because by default, it is the first thing that you are going to do. And if you can't do that, you really can't not move on to number 2. Not very easily. All right.
There were 3 in the chat.
Yeah, read them to me.
Jim says turn on your radio. Ralph says activate a personal disaster plan.
Yep.
Olga says use the radio to check in on others.
Yep.
And I can't pronounce his name. Kanatake says run away to a safe room.
Yeah, if you could. All right. The next thing you're going to do, once you've checked on your family, go ahead and throw out a couple of things. And when I hear it, I'm going to go on to the next item, next slide. What's the next thing you would do after you've checked on your family? You're standing there looking at this. Anybody?
Jason says check on your neighbors.
Check on your neighbors. Help out any that you can. And the reason I put this as number 2 is that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what all my neighbors did.
Okay, and let's see. Dennis says check on your home. Loretta says load up the mobile in the car and take to looking for others that might need help.
You guys are good. You guys are really good because you've done the next slide and the next slide. The next one.
Ryan says my shack is in my basement. the first place he goes to, but he spends a lot of time down there anyway. Check on your
Live in
neighbors,
Iowa, that's
anyone with
perfect.
special needs, like oxygen or medical devices.
Perfect.
Help the neighbors open the road for emergency vehicles.
Yep.
And power road for county, so no TV, radio, internet, and almost no cell phone from Bob.
Yep, exactly. So
Don't
the
forget
next
the pets.
thing after we stepped out and we talked to our neighbors, we made sure that everyone came out. Now I live in a kind of semi-rural area. I live on a dead-end street, I mean, I've got immediate neighbors. Don't get me wrong, but I'm on the edge of town. But we went around and made sure everybody emerged from their house, made sure everybody was okay, even though we couldn't really move around. Like, for example, I had 3 large maples across my road, plus a 70-foot spruce on my car, that kind of thing. Even though we couldn't move around, we made sure that we checked on all of the neighbors. And it just seemed to be the thing that was driving the entire neighborhood. Everybody was out walking around checking on each other, people that had never spoken to each other before all the years they've lived here. And then third, somebody mentioned it, so I'm going right on to the next one. Start your own recovery, create a safe environment, move your debris, and set up your emergency power. It's exactly what we did next. First thing I did after I walked back after checking on all the neighbors, pulled out my generator, yanked the cord, plugged in the refrigerator, all right, and then started cleaning up glass. Pro trick here, shop vacs will clean glass out of your lawn. Anyway, start your recovery, create a safe environment, move the debris, set up your emergency power, and last, I heard it, so I'm gonna go on, start helping your community recover. And it's interesting that you guys nailed every single one of these. It seems to me that we have a culture in amateur radio that this is exactly what we do. We move to start helping our community recover because of our training, because of the way we communicate.
Someone
All right,
also said,
so,
start or join an
go ahead.
ad hoc net or any sort of a net for situational awareness.
Perfect. That's exactly what happened next. All right, you're 2 slides ahead. What we did not have, and the reason I have this qualified for many immediately after the Derecho, is that the impact of any natural disaster, of any disaster, varies with time and distance. So I can't speak for everybody, but this is what happened in my area, in my corner, in my location. We had no power. The power went down right around 12:30 when the Derecho hit the west side of town. Also, the National Weather Service went out. All the measuring instruments stopped measuring right when the Derecho hit the western side of Cedar Rapids. We lost all of our radio and all of our televisions. Only 3 radio stations survived the Derecho in our area, and none of them were any of our news type radio stations. We had no phone service, no cell or landline. Now there was some intermittent. I have US Cellular, I have Verizon, and I also have a service that roams between any carrier in the area. I had no cell except intermittent. I could get a text out every now and then. No internet. Fiber was cut everywhere. And also cell phone and cell stations, a lot of the generators and things like that were actually crushed. So it wasn't just a momentary kind of flicker. I mean, we were done. There was nothing. There was no communications there. I didn't have any water because I'm on a well. City water was still on. You couldn't travel. Roads were blocked. Where are you going to go anyway? There's nowhere to go. Everything, I mean, it's everything for 30 miles north and 30 miles south is gone. Now, I don't know this yet, right? And there was a time when we had to go around utility crew fixing a down power line, and they made us go around them very safely, and a piece of metal got my tire, and fortunately I had a good spare, but you don't want to be out traveling. There's no place to buy a tire. So, and of course we had a curfew after dark. Nobody needs to be out. It was very dangerous. Nobody needed to be out. So really no travel. And here's the thing, no supplies, because everything at this point is affected. the local gas stations, there's the local grocery stores. I don't think there was a grocery store open for at least 3 days. And that's with backup power. Generators were failing, doors were damaged, that kind of thing. So no emergency services because we didn't have communications and they couldn't get to you. So they were there, their repeaters were up, they were out doing their job. They were getting calls from people that did have cell service and that kind of thing. But pretty much a large portion of my area was without emergency services. And here is the most important one. No information as to the extent of the damage. At this point, we still don't know. Is this my own neighborhood? Is this my whole town? Is this my whole state? We had no idea at this point. What we did have, we had a repeater on emergency power. Public safety repeaters were up. We are co-located, so we had our repeater. We all have generators because we all practice emergency communications preparedness, and we know it's all about power. Batteries, other personal disaster supplies, yes, we have that. ARRS group, ARRS members, we really didn't know who was available. Some people were up, some people were down in terms of emergency power and time and being able to even get out of their door, that kind of thing. And we also have amateur radio throughout the county and throughout the state. We do know that. We have that. So this is what we did. And somebody mentioned this. When our leadership went down and did not come back up, there was a handful of brand new hams who started a net spontaneously on the repeater when nobody else came up. And I heard them on there and I got on and I said, you guys keep going. I'm going to monitor you. I'm going to support you. I'll let you know if you're doing anything out of compliance. Just go ahead and do what you're doing. We got some called up to a repeater about 70 miles north and got 3 people from that area who really could not understand the extent of the damage, who could not understand. They said, why do you need us to come and help? Well, we got them down there and they then to our repeater and they did help out. And then I would monitor, there's about 30 miles south is Interstate 80. I would monitor 80 and look for hams driving by and get some situational awareness from them, that kind of thing. And eventually, as local hams regained their footing, they came on and started helping out too. But it was an extremely important net for resources. What gas station has gas? Is there a line? Is there a grocery store open? Can you get down this certain street? And we were taking ground truth only, firsthand information. If you heard it from somebody else, it had no value. We were not broadcasting. If somebody came on and said, do you know where there's a pallet of generators, that kind of thing, and we had the information, we would give that out. But it was an extremely important issue. When you need resources, you don't want to have to spend resources to get them. If you need gas, you don't want to have to use up your gasoline looking for gas. If you need ice, you don't want to have to leave your home, turn off your generator and go look for ice. It was extremely important to know what resources were available, where they were. And having that ground truth, that firsthand information for a city who had no other communications was very important. And morale. They told jokes, they asked trivia questions, they got people to push to talk that had never pushed to talk before. They had that net, they ran that net for 6 days. And people listened to it with their scanners and things like that. That net stayed up for 6 days. And the reason it stayed up for 6 days, because it was 5 days before we got anything up and running in this town. This is what it looked like 5 days post-Derecho. There were no resources. You couldn't get people in. Our electric company, Alliant, brought in 500 Alliant employees to help out. National Guard came in on Friday. Our American Red Cross came in on Saturday. And remember that quote I read at the beginning about if you're not hearing anything, you might be, you might want to worry. That was the problem. Information wasn't getting out. There was no news service. There was no telephone. If a news crew came in, they had to drive back to where they came from to produce because there was no cell service. So very little information was flowing in or out. This again was 6 days post derecho. This is what it looked like. Because the damage was so widespread, there was no way that we were going to recover it quickly. Just no way. All right. So that is on Saturday, and the derecho was on Monday. All right. So I'm going to talk about lessons learned.
Before you go on, Lee, someone in the chat made a good point.
Yes.
When you have that kind of damage, when you leave your house, to turn your master circuit breaker off, because you could cause fires when they start to restore the power to your area. So the most important thing is to turn your master circuit breaker off.
Yeah, and in my case, I'm a landlord. That's what I do for a living. I have rental properties, and I own 6 generators. And I did not leave my generator on when I was gone ever. So what I did was I came home and I threw everything out that was in my refrigerator, mayonnaise and stuff like that. You can't keep it cold enough, like in a cooler, that kind of thing.
Right.
I ran my freezer. I kept my freezer going because you can leave your generator off and your freezer will stay cold for a long time. Your refrigerator, not so much. So what I did was I came home, threw everything away out of my refrigerator so that I could turn off my generator when I left. I'm not going to leave it on when I'm gone.
Rick, this is Dan. So current first responder advice is to turn off not just the master breaker, but all breakers beneath it.
Right. Well, you know what? I had all the utilities ripped off my house. Most people did. There was nothing. There was no physical way you were going to get any power to your home. There's just no way.
I'm just telling you how we're trained.
Everything was just ripped off the side of the house. So there's not, it's turning off your breakers at that point wasn't like day one kind of stuff. So cleaning up glass, taking the tree off your car, that was a little more, and then when we had enough of the debris removed that you could start to handle those kinds of wires, then we dealt with that then. But that's true. And you really need to be careful around power. We only had 3 deaths in Iowa due to the derecho. One of them was a bicyclist during the derecho south of Cedar Rapids. One was a volunteer firefighter sitting on her front porch west of Cedar Rapids, about 50 miles west of Cedar Rapids. And the third was an electrician was electrocuted. So those are the 3 derecho related deaths that we had. Believe it or not, that's it. We're very, very, very lucky except for that. All right. So most people know the disaster management cycle. Prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery. We're just going to look at it from the preparedness, response, recovery angle because that's pretty much what we do in amateur radio. All right. Lessons learned: preparedness. Have a family communications plan. Keep your gas tank full. It provides you power, shelter, climate controlled shelter. It was 80 plus degrees. It's between 80 and 100 most days after the derecho. And it also then can provide you transportation. Have food and water for 3 days. Like I said, if you're not getting supplies in after 3 days, you've got other concerns. And again, if you're an island, that is different. That is going to be, you're going to have to extend that out. Have cash for one week supplies. Again, anybody can have those supplies ready. This does not require a major shift of lifestyle to have food and water for 3 days and have cash for 1 week's supplies. That is doable, and that is just really what you need. After that, you're gonna find a way, so we could go up about 70 miles to get gas, but they didn't have internet, so we had to have cash. Keep a generator and keep a supply of gasoline. I can tell you that after 12 days, 14 days when the last generator in my neighborhood shut off, it was peaceful. And then, of course, then the sound of chainsaws. But keep a generator. Everybody ran a generator. Amateur radio preparedness. Know your SOGs, standard operating guidelines, especially activation. And I'll talk about that again in a minute. Know your emergency frequencies. Do not expect to have access to those either on your radio or on your computer. Print them out and tape them to your wall. We had a fellow who came in from Minnesota via radio, via HF, who had family here, and he knew how to contact us because he had our emergency frequencies on his wall, and he was a huge asset. Know your surrounding community's frequencies and know how to get situational awareness. Response. Activate yourself. Be ready and then wait. If anybody's like volunteered for the American Red Cross, you know, you hurry up, get ready, go, and then you wait. You wait for your assignment. Wait for the situation to warrant your participation. But you know what? If you can't activate yourself, if you don't know how to get yourself ready, you can't be useful. You need to activate yourself. Do not wait for somebody else to tell you what needs to be done or what you need to do or that kind of thing. Know what to do. Activate yourself. Know how to get your initial situational awareness. If you don't do that yourself, don't expect anybody else to do it for you. You need to know how to do that. Go to your frequencies and push to talk. And here's why I say that. We all know net discipline, in emergency nets, skywarn nets, when that kind of thing, that you're expected to listen and not push to talk unless you're asked to or unless you have emergency traffic. But this is different. When you're looking for information, when you're looking for situational awareness, when you're looking for resources, I don't want to have to guess who's out there. I don't want to have to try to figure out if you're listening. I don't want to have to know that you were there listening and didn't let anybody else know. So go to your frequencies and let people know you're there. Take spontaneous volunteers and do on-the-job training. That's that OJT, on-the-job training. And the reason I say that is we have a lot of very intelligent, very resourceful people out there who are not yet a part of our groups, part of our ARRL groups. They're willing to help out and they are able to help out, especially when you're affected and they're there, take them. And then again, you need to maintain ongoing situational awareness. Do not expect anybody else to do that for you. Figure out how to do it yourself. Use your nets to respond to what is needed. That is the all hazards approach. And I'll talk about that in a second. Accept leadership from all ARRL members in an emergency. That is the whole community approach. And what I mean by that is, if your leadership doesn't show up, you want those that aren't in leadership to feel comfortable, to feel confident, and to know that they will be supported by leadership in an emergency, in a situation where they're going to be asked to lead and make mistakes and maybe not do things the way you've always done them, but know that they're going to be supported because that's what is needed in your community. And that is represented by the whole community approach. Now I'll talk about that again in a minute. Now recovery. Recovery with no communications, keep the information net going. Resources and morale. That's all we had. It was amazingly useful. Do health and welfare checks. If you have cell data, go around to people that don't have internet yet, don't have smartphones, and let them use your cell phone as a hotspot so that they can download and upload their hospital data, check on their families, that kind of thing. And do health and welfare traffic. Take some notes and contact their families for them. It's an amazing morale booster to know that you have talked to their daughter in a state over. It's an amazing, amazing morale, especially in an emergency, especially with communications emergency. It's extremely important. Do health and welfare traffic. Now remember, we're not first responders. We couldn't take emergency traffic. We didn't have cell phones. You know, there's no way to get around. So we were not doing emergency traffic. We were doing health and welfare traffic for 6 days. A huge bonus to our community. And then there's a larger community out there of amateur radio. Visit other nets. Get out of your comfort zone and go visit other nets and check in. They want to hear your story. They want to hear how you're doing in your community. County over maybe wasn't even affected. They want to talk to you. Having that, again, those kinds of connections is another way of making sure that you keep your situational awareness. It's another really good way of getting and keeping situational awareness, is being able to talk to other people, even when that's not something you normally do. Now, when you're recovering, when communications are back up, listen to your community. Your community is full of stories. Believe me, everybody had a story to tell here. Everybody did. And it could help direct you on how you can help restore your community. And if you're not wearing your communications vest, do something else and be a force multiplier. Get out there and help out anywhere else that you can. Remember, we've got communications back. So go out and be a force multiplier with another group. And of course, do a formal Aries after action, because the story needs to be told, and it needs to be formalized so that it becomes part of the record, because it already is. And having it there really does help everybody. Cedar Rapids has had a natural disaster before. We have a historical response to disasters here. We have a historical, I've been part of a VOAD, a local VOAD made up of 50 or so organizations for the past 10 years. We have, make it part, document it so it becomes part of your history, because 10 years later, you are going to revisit it. Sorry to say. All right. Here in Cedar Rapids and Lynn County, we are still in recovery. We really are. There's blue tarps everywhere. Debris still being picked up. We are doing an after action. We're planning and we're training to the plan. We're working with our partner and served agencies, and we're working on rebuilding our damaged infrastructure. One of the things that really came out of this disaster that's important to me, that I want to make sure that we don't forget in amateur radio, is that part of what we do isn't just our training and our networking, it's also our equipment and our antennas. And when that's damaged or destroyed, that absolutely has to be replaced. That can't be ignored. All right, here's in Lynn County, here's one of our part of one of our SOGs, our standard operating guidelines. And if you look at the bottom in the bold letters, it says, if the EC, emergency coordinator, or assistant emergency coordinator cannot be reached, any amateur familiar with these guidelines is encouraged to begin operations if the need for assistance is obvious. Written right in there. Here's the links. I think you'll find a lot of this. If you want more information or more focused information, there's some links there. I threw in a couple of things just for interest. FEMA activation levels, which we do not use, but I think that we will be coming across those in areas in our, like our CERT teams and our community-based teams kind of need to know how maybe our federal agencies would act, and then we could, not that we match them, but at least we can be aware of them. And then the all hazards approach. I live in a county that has a nuclear power plant. And so we've done the radiological drills for a long time. We've moved to all hazards, but all hazards does not mean that you prepare for everything. It means that you prepare for anything. And so we've done derecho drills here. One of our sets was a derecho, but we are not basing our drills on the derecho. We're basing our drills on, do you know how to activate? Do you know how to communicate? Do you know how to demobilize? Things like that, so that you can be prepared for anything. And then whole community, and this is the last slide here. Whole community is something that FEMA really encourages, especially now that they've gone from, I think, 70% of financial assistance down to about 13% is all any community is going to get, about 13% FEMA funding now. It is up to our communities now to invest and to maintain what we have. And one of those things, if you look at Principle 6 in the list, it says leverage and strengthen social infrastructure, networks, and assets. And if you think about that in terms of amateur radio, it really fits us. Strengthen what works well in communities on a daily basis. This principle recognizes the existing structures and relationships that are present in the daily lives of individuals, families, businesses, and organizations before an incident occurs, can be leveraged and empowered to act effectively during and after a disaster strikes. And that is definitely what we do in amateur radio. We practice to make sure that what we do on a daily basis, that we can do that during an emergency. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening. Thank you. I will stop sharing. And
I think the best story of all of that was the guy that was filming his warehouse with the bathroom in it, and the contractor that came, and the only thing that survived was the bathroom, and he filmed the guy and said, "Oh, I built that."
That's one of my favorite lines too.
Yes.
I love that. Well, thank you.
That was a great presentation. Thank you very, very much.
Somebody else had Derechos too.
Yeah, you're seeing the chat now.
Now I am. I'm just down at the bottom. So what I did for connecting, I had some out of area contacts, and every now and then you'd be able to do, so for the first 3 days, you might be able to get a cell signal on Verizon, maybe 10, 20 seconds worth. And so you could get a text out. After about 3 days, you could get about a minute of cell service. And so I would just contact my out of area contacts and make sure that they knew I was okay. And that was it. That's all you could do. Technically, you could leave the area. You could pack everything up and go. But most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to stay with their homes, their dogs, their family, their neighbors, and things like that. So really, if you're in a disaster like that, you are going to be at home. You are going to be maintaining your own environment. So basically, communications, we did monitor the HF net, and I would have to say, or the HF frequencies. Ours is 3970 kilohertz. The problem is that there was so little information coming out that every time we made a request or asked people to monitor that for us, they'd say, why? What do why can't you just, one person finally said, well, why can't you just Google that? Not understanding that no internet is no internet. Nothing. So it wasn't, what I would have liked to have had is have more out of area people come in, especially on the HF frequencies. That would have been really helpful. So we've been working with Minnesota and Illinois on that and doing a lot better.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the on-the-job training? I know we had done some things that you had to do to train people not to do power lines and stuff like that, and all the resources you had to gather for that.
Yeah. So there is an issue of safety there, and we have one of the new hands is a licensed electrician, but the issue of safety is you really need to kind of take it out of the equation and focus on and let the professionals come in and do their work and just focus on communications. So on the job training is less about recovery as it is more about being able to push to talk, honestly, getting people to push that button and to communicate. And that's really what it's all about. Does that answer that question?
Yes. Dale wants to know about your good and bad experiences with spontaneous volunteers.
Almost all of our volunteers were spontaneous volunteers. I've been part of my place in the VOAD for the last 10 years, volunteer organizations active in disasters. Sometimes they can be co-eds, community organizations active in disasters. But ours is huge, and we meet quarterly. And it came out of the major floods that we had here. The spontaneous volunteers are typically handled by, well, here it's United Way, and Emergency Management Agency together sets up a way of managing those volunteers. And I've actually been in that role for the last 10 years, but we've gotten so successful at it that we've pretty much affiliated most viable volunteers with an organization. Your average spontaneous volunteer in this area, we could not bring people in, honestly, because there were no hotel rooms. There's no place to put them. People were living in tents. Like I said, I'm a landlord, and I have some property on the west side of town, and I have people living in tents on my property that I didn't know them. They were living in tents, and so I took over some coolers, and I took over some fencing for their dogs and things like that. They were just sleeping in tents. They had no place else to go. So there was no place to really handle spontaneous volunteers, and it wasn't until the larger national organizations came in that were self-sufficient that would stay maybe at a church or something like that, or in their trailers or in their buses or things like that. But we had some major national volunteers agencies come in and help out, and it wasn't really so there wasn't a whole lot of places for spontaneous volunteers because there's no place to go. There was no power, there was no communication. So how are you going to, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? So it's kind of a different situation. It's not like sandbagging. So it was mostly power lines and trees. So
I see Stan's got his hand up out there. We want to pick him up.
Stan, yes.
Hi, Lee. How are you?
Good.
Nice job. I have a question about the traffic. Was most of the messaging that went on your nets over the period of time tactical? Did you use formal traffic, 213s, ARRL, doesn't matter, whatever? And were, after maybe a day or two, did you have any capability of sending digital stuff, or was it all voice?
Well, the nature of the disaster being so widespread really precluded doing mutual aid. It was very difficult. We all have our radios, so it wasn't like we needed that kind of equipment. What we really needed was information. So information was gold. We didn't have it. We didn't know how far the damage went. We didn't know what the extent of the damage was. We didn't know where the resources were, which gas stations were open. You could travel 70 miles north and end up traveling 50 miles west then to find a small town that might have something open. And you're using all of your resources. So what we needed was a large network of people who were willing to answer questions and to keep that situational awareness. So in terms of ordering supplies, what we could have used was generators and gasoline and ice. People, with their insulin and things like that. But generators, gasoline, and ice is really what we needed. And getting the message out that that's what we needed, it was hard for people to understand the extent of the damage because there was no reporting really going on. And so it wasn't until 5 days later that we could really address some of those things, because we'd ask for generators and people would say, well, can I bring it next Tuesday? Yeah, right.
Well, my question though is the mechanics of those things you're talking about. Was this all, you pick up a radio and say, hey, so-and-so over here needs a generator, or was there the quote unquote formal traffic like on ARRL forms or anything? What percentage, if you will, was formal versus
zero
tactical?
formal?
Well, yeah, it's pretty typical around here. The thing is that we did not stand up a net other than the information net. And part of the reason is because our leadership was whacked. They didn't have their antennas up and things like that. And because it was such a widespread kind of thing, I couldn't call over to the next county for supplies. So there was really no need for a net, and we weren't doing emergency traffic, so there was no need for tactical, and we weren't doing staging or bringing in volunteers because there was no place to put them. So there was no resource net needed. So really what we needed was information. And that kind of thing, it needs to be timely and it needs to be instantaneous. It needs to be very fresh information. The fact that there's not a line at this gas station was the most valuable information. So it really was a matter of people willing to push to talk and willing to share their information. So no, we didn't stand up any of the regular nets. And so no, there was no mechanics that went with that.
Dawn has a question in the chat about, did you develop a standard operating procedure for health and welfare traffic on a route until the Red Cross or whomever eventually took over health and welfare traffic?
Who asked that question?
Dawn from Idaho.
So the American Red Cross didn't come in until Saturday after the Monday of the Derecho. And our resource centers didn't set up until that Friday afternoon after the Derecho, so 5 days later. Health and welfare was really a very amateur radio community-based organic effort. Paul hadn't shown up, so we sent somebody to check on him. The people out in Atkins that had the measured 126-mile-an-hour winds, we hadn't heard from them, so we called somebody from another community to go check on them. It was a very organic kind of thing. The formality of it didn't work because one of the biggest problems when you have no communications is, unless you know about the repeater and about amateur radio, you don't even know that it's happening. It's happening over your head somewhere. People in your neighborhood don't know that it's going on until you walk down the street and say to them, hey, do you want me to check on your family member? So really that's how it had to be done. There was no way to get the message out. There was no radio or television to broadcast the fact that we could send messages. The only way you could get information was via amateur radio. And if you weren't a ham, you had to walk over and speak to somebody, who was. So that was a big issue. That we could have done a lot better with health and welfare, but getting the message out is impossible.
Bob has his hand up.
Hopefully Lee will agree with this. Formal incident command didn't exist because people in authority were not in communication. And so like Lee said, it was a very organic thing. People took care of immediate needs. The immediate needs were, where do I get gas to refill my generator?
Correct. That's exactly right. Our EOC opened up the Sunday after. You couldn't drive anywhere. You couldn't even, you couldn't even get to the EOC, and who's going to show up? So, and if with no communications, for example, our county offices didn't have telephones for 3 weeks after the derecho. No phone service for our counties. So you couldn't, there was not, it's pandemic also. It's not, there's no communications. So yeah, sewer problems. Well, it's kind of a funny story. You can flush a toilet with a bucket of water, honestly. And the day after the derecho, okay, there's some guys down the street and they had some forklifts, and they're very good with forklifts. And they were coming to move big trees that had fallen across my driveway. And they suddenly turned around and yelled, hey, your garbage truck's here. So I ran to the house and grabbed my garbage, I'm full bull running down the lane with my bag of garbage in my hand, and that garbage truck had made it from a different community all the way to my place just to pick up my garbage. I was so proud of them. Do what you got to do.
Is there any link repeaters in your area, or wide area
No, we don't.
repeaters?
No, we don't use linked repeaters.
Because there was some questions.
Well, to the west of us, there is a warn net that does use linked repeaters, but they're much more rural than we are.
Okay.
No, we used HF.
Mm-hmm. And there was no communications with the emergency management, correct?
Well, okay, public safety had their radios up, and they were out doing what they were going to do. But the city was doing their thing, and then emergency management was managing the other things, and so it was it was more of a response that matched the resources that you had. And it is what it is.
Bob, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, I just, I feel ashamed almost. I did not appreciate what an advantage I had being 25 miles south of Cedar Rapids, that I had internet and I had power. And I didn't really appreciate the fact that they did not have either one, and that cell phone communications was almost non-existent. I should have done a lot more to contribute. I should have been there 24/7.
I think everybody felt that way, Bob. The problem is that there was no information coming out of the area either.
Yeah, I mean, it took 3 days to notify the National Guard. And
Yeah,
there was a real breakdown in the politics. Nobody was owning.
Well, we're not going to talk about the politics. We're going to talk about amateur radio. Yeah, it is what it is. It pretty much matches the resources that you have.
Another question, was there any use of WinLink or other digital comms over HF in and out that might have been coordinated with local VHF or UHF?
There was a little bit of that, but like I said, what we really needed was information. And so for our digital comms, there was a little bit of that going on. But what happened was whenever I would ask for, like, say, generators or something like that, a big pallet would come into one of the big box stores and we'd find out about it because somebody's standing right there with their radio and they'd get on the repeater and let us know. So the information was flowing was so fast and so instantaneous that those kinds of messages really were so time sensitive that it didn't make any sense to send a request for resources out of the area. It really just didn't. It was, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, WinLink was actually useful, but the gaining the resources was needed to be even quicker.
See, a lot of people, I think, are having trouble putting their heads around the fact that there was no radio, no TV. It was a total information blackout. There's one whole swath in the middle of the state, and no one had any idea what was going on, including emergency management. And
correct.
People can't get their heads around that. There was nothing.
My daughter lives in northwest Iowa. I'm in east central Iowa. I got a message out to her that I was okay, and she said, okay, because of what? She didn't know. So yeah, no information. And I think the lesson in that is that when you are on your own, you have to understand that it's also part of your job to get the message out, to get the information out. And that is not easy. And it's helpful to have a good PIO. Definitely a plug for PIOs. Get the message out.
One of the things that we did is we had a ham in a central place in the local towns with note cards. And whenever they would get information about anything, they would write it on the note card and post it on a bulletin board so all of the people could read it and see what was going on, because that was the only way they were getting their news or any sort of information at all what was going on. And that's very
I've never been in I've never been in a disaster where you didn't need to have a fire. Honestly, yeah.
It makes a huge difference for community relations.
Yes, it does. Huge. Yeah, and KE0SSM put a comment in there, and I want to give kudos to Dave. He's one of those that picked up the information net when formal net did not come on, and he stayed with it for 6 days. He's also a licensed electrician and knows how to service a generator. Really, really huge, huge resource to the community. And afterwards, and somebody asked about spontaneous volunteers, which is a little different than amateur radio volunteers because they're pretty much already affiliated with amateur radio. But one of the things that did come out of that was that all those that were listening and all those that were participating that didn't have any training asked for training afterwards, came to me and others and said, I want to help, give me some training. That was huge, huge in our community. Yep. Thanks for bringing that up, Dave. And thank you, Dave, for all your work. Yep. And they're still around and they're still serving the community. You never know. Anything else?
There's nothing in the hands. And how are you in the chat there?
We're all up to date in the chat.
I think at the risk, I don't want to insult anybody here because everybody does an excellent job, but at the risk of doing too well, if we set up the emergency nets, if we set up the resource nets and things like that, we might miss that opportunity to have new hams come on and run an information net that serves the community for 6 days. So our training could train us out of a great opportunity. And no offense to anyone, because I'm there too. I mean, I'm the same. So, Dennis. I can see Dennis's hand is up.
Yeah. He's my neighbor over here.
I was trying to get unmuted. You had mentioned earlier that you had 2 TV stations that were still on the air, but they weren't news broadcast stations. Would it have made a difference if somehow those other stations had teamed up with them and used their reporters to get messages out on those other TV stations?
Well, okay, two issues there. Okay, first of all, no TV stations. They were radio stations. And one of them did set up in a parking lot. And the only way you would know that they were there is if you drove by, because there was no way to get the message out. And they did a great job. They handed out water, that kind of thing. But if you didn't have power, then you also didn't have a radio. You didn't have power, you also didn't have a television set. So the average person, now hams were doing okay. Amateur radio was doing great. But like I said, we were above the, we were up here in the atmosphere, and the average person was on the ground. So the only way the average person would know that that radio station was broadcasting is if we told them.
Okay, I guess it's not, nobody has AM radios anymore?
Battery powered AM radio is kind of rare, I think.
Only on the automobiles, only on the vehicles.
True.
I still use them a lot.
That's true. I do too. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's hard to imagine not being able to get the message out, but it really did happen. Amateur radio was boots on the ground the whole way around. And our ability to communicate and network across a wide area was really a crucial resource to our community.
Okay, we got Dave over here. It's got his hand up.
I have a wind-up radio too, Jan. I used it. I do.
KE0SSM, come on in.
Hey, Lee. Hey, everybody.
Hi, Dave.
Well, man, what a whirlwind this storm was. I think everybody was in complete shock once it ended. It's really hard to realize what you can do when all of a sudden you have nothing. And I have to, I know Lee's covered a whole lot of different bases, and it's kind of hard to relate to what's going on, but it was amazing to see the community come together, see neighbors help each other, to be walking around and have people afterwards say, hey, I see you got a bunch of antennas on your car. Are you a ham? I listened to you on the scanner during the Derecho, and you guys were great. You were the only way I was able to find gasoline or food or find out what was going on, because there was nothing. My scanner was the only way to connect with the outside world, and listening to you guys. How can I become a ham?
Exactly. Well said. Yep.
And
It's
Dave
true.
from Washington's got his hand up.
Yes.
Or Dale, brother. I'm sorry, Dale.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is a fantastic presentation. Real live, real experience. I live in a community of about 100 homes, single family residents, and no preparedness, no care to prepare. But I think what we're going to have are volunteers coming out of the woodwork. And one thing that my question is, was there much use of the GMRS channels and or citizens band? That's it.
CB, I think Dave could probably talk to that. CB, yes. We did not coordinate well with CB. We have a lot of factories, a lot of truck drivers and things around here that do use CBs, and a lot of trucks, you know, blown off the road and that kind of thing. So there was a lot of that traffic, but as amateur radio people, we did not coordinate with them very well. As far as FRS and GMRS, our emergency management agency here is starting up CERT again. So I'm hoping that we build up that network, because that would have been a huge force multiplier for our community. Huge. That would have been awesome. Yep. Yeah, that's a definite yes for us. Information was so appreciated, and there were not a lot of rumors. I have a rumor form that I'm used to using, and there were not a lot of rumors. It was a really intense and well done effort by amateur radio. And if we bring others into that, they'll learn from that very easily. GMRS and FRS people that don't have licenses would learn a lot and do really well partnering with amateur radio. I think that's a definite yes.
Dennis and Lisa make a good point from California. One thing that's needed to be in our toolkits is dealing with the mental health aspects of dealing with a large-scale disaster. Quote, critical incident stress disaster management, unquote. We are affected by being in a part of a disaster. That's very important.
So I don't know, do you guys have mobile home parks in your communities? Okay.
Oh,
do you know what a 100-mile-an-hour wind does to a mobile home park?
Same thing that a 7.1 earthquake will do.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have a lot of experience with that.
They get to learn how to fly.
Yeah, there's still a lot of emotional damage from that. Those are real communities too. Those mobile home parks are real communities. They take care of each other. They care about each other. They have resource centers, you know, where they pick up their mail and that kind of stuff. So they're a real community. And there was a lot of loss. And it oftentimes in those communities, especially if it's a low resource community, not all mobile home parks are, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if there's an element that's low resource, the brunt of that falls on the people that do have resources. And so you not only do you have people who are needy coming in, but you've also got people who are tipping over based on the fact that now they're having to spread resources. For example, we were all sharing generators, multiple people plugging into one generator, sharing food, things like that. So it stresses the entire community.
It's a great point. And I think the thing about critical incident stress disorder or the critical incident stress management is how it affects us personally as hams. If we're involved in a disaster, I can speak from personal experience with this one with the earthquake, because it did affect me. I was affected by that, seriously affected emotionally. And I'm not ashamed to talk about that. It is a real thing, and people need to be aware of that. And you need to be able to have, when I mentioned toolkit, it's knowing how to deal with that, how to recover from it. And I will tell you that our community here, your story, Lee, this is fantastic. I mean, Lisa and I have been sitting here talking about it. This is kind of the same experience we had here in our community with the big earthquake here. Is that we literally in the coming weeks after the earthquake doubled our membership in areas here, and I was very, very proud of the work that our guys did out here in Indian Wells Valley with that. And doing exactly what you're talking about is maintaining like a situational awareness net and helping
there was a slide, Dennis, that included listen to your community. One of the things that is really important, and I'm wondering if you had the same experience, is that you need to stop and let people tell their story.
Absolutely.
It's really, really important.
And we did that.
Take the time.
There's two things that I want to share with you. One is we did exactly that. We have an annual barbecue schedule after 4th of July. And of course, the earthquake hit on Thursday. Barbecue would have been on Monday. We had the barbecue regardless. And it was just to bring people together, our hands.
That's the other thing that I would point out is if you do something, like if you have a hobby or if you have a routine, I like to drink coffee. I have a coffee maker that it does not depend on, it's an off-grid coffee maker because I'm going to have my cup of coffee. And that is something that's normal for me. And I think if you can find something, if you do crossword puzzles or whatever it is, if you can find something that brings that element of normalcy to your life, it makes you much more resilient.
Well, it was an opportunity.
But plan for it. Be aware of that.
You have to plan for it. Yeah, it was an opportunity for our members to be able to visit with each other. And we, like you're saying, tell your story, to share our stories.
Absolutely.
But the other thing I wanted to share that we do here, and I know this isn't unique, but I know it's rare, is that we have a group here called our Emergency Services Committee. And we normally meet monthly. With the pandemic, we started meeting bi-weekly because there was just so much information going on. But it's an opportunity for all the volunteer organizations and first responders, so police, fire, hospital, our amateur radio groups, both our Amateur Radio Club and our Aries group, Red Cross, County EOC is part of this. We meet and we discuss the issues that we're dealing with. And it's a method to network between all those organizations. So when the disaster hits, we know who to talk to. And they know who we are, we know who they are. And that's something again, one of those things here in Ridgecrest and Indian Wells Valley, we're real proud of that, is that we had a very rapid recovery after the earthquakes because
absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the elements of that that's super powerful, if you can replicate it in your community, I'd recommend it. What Dennis is talking about is that especially if you have new people that come in, if you have a historical mind as to your disasters in your community and things like that, especially new people, it helps integrate them and get them on board. One of the biggest gaps in a response and recovery is having new people on board that don't know what to do and don't have that support system. So what Dennis is talking about is really important.
And it's a community asset. I mean, public is invited to participate in these, and we do get members of the public that do come and participate. So it's a pretty fantastic group, and like I say, it really expedited recovery following the earthquakes. But Lee, thank you. What a brilliant presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, 2 thumbs up from both of us.
It's been a long year, I can tell you that. It's been a long 6 years or whatever, however long it's been.
Steve has sent me a direct message, and I think he meant to go out to everybody. And it says, cook all your food before it spoils and have a block party.
A good idea. Very satisfying. That's a great idea.
Yep. And Len wants to know, based on your experience, do you have a list of must-have versus good-to-have equipment to have ready for an emergency use caliber?
Yeah. I just highly recommend having a generator. Just point blank. If you can possibly keep a generator and some gas, like I keep thinking, and my son's car is low on gas. and we know it, and I'm gonna dump it in there, and then he's in his gas tank and he's gonna go fill it up, and I have 4 of those that we rotate all the time. But I tell you, if you want to be prepared, you have to be mindful of things like that. Emergency power is crucial. I like having a lantern that sheds light in a wide area so that you can have a normal sit down at a table. You can even sit and read or have your cup of coffee or talk to somebody else. Things like that. Must have, I would say, cash and a generator, honestly, and a car. That, you know, having a car is a huge resource. And if you don't, you know, knowing somebody that does and that is willing to make sure that you have access to it is really important. Make that connection. Yeah, like I didn't have a well, but I mean, I have a well, so we didn't have water, and getting water was kind of a big deal. Having at least have empty containers that you can fill with water. That even if you can't store water, if you have a 5 or not 5 gallon, that's pretty heavy, but an empty container in your closet that you can fill with water, you're already ahead.
And the cash should be small bills.
Yeah, if you take a pill jar and fill it with quarters, it's exactly $10, and you can throw that in your glove compartment. It's really, that's really handy. Yeah, that's a good idea. Keep it small. Yeah, otherwise you're going to be giving away your 20s for a bag of chips. So one of our grocery stores opened up, but they had to throw out, it's a large grocery store, they had to throw out all the frozen food. And so the only thing you could get were dry goods and produce. And I think people ate pretty healthy for a week on all the produce at the grocery stores. So that's not too bad. Having community was the biggest part of this. Honestly, if you have community, you have, you know, you're halfway there. If you don't have a generator, you can plug into your neighbors. If you don't have cash, you can get cash from your neighbor. I mean, I'm not saying that you should outsource all your resources, but having community really is that buffer that you really need so that you don't have to think of everything. And of course, having your amateur radio license. That was huge. Is there anything else? Okay. Well, thanks.
Yes, very nice, very
Move
nice.
on.
This has been a great presentation. We had quite a few people come in, and as we know, this will end up in the video slots for people to go through later, and we get a lot of hits there. So this is a good one. This is one of the better ones. Ralph I think he's got clap up. Yeah, he did. Okay, it's awful hard when you on these small, when you got a lot of members, and you just got these small screens across. If that's a clap or the hand up type of a thing. And same thing with Jason. I think he's clapping. Good. All right. Any more comments, folks?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Nice knowing you guys are there.
And Lee, if you'll send me that presentation, I'll get it out there with him, and we'll get all this information out to you folks.
All right.
This was great. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you. Good night.
73s, everyone.
Thank you, Lee. 7-3. See you later.
Yep. Thank you.
And good luck to you in your continuing recovery.
Yeah. Thank you very much. The well wishes are needed.